you're a child, your world is a lot smaller, almost like there's an imaginary rubber band holding you or tethering you to your home, pulling you back if you stray too far. When I was a kid, my rubber band only stretched a couple streets away in Wilton, New Hampshire. And Wilton's not that much unlike Plymouth. It's an old mill town, very small community, has a nice main street, lots of businesses. Railroad goes through it. But when I was a kid growing up in the 1980s, it's kind of funny looking back now because there's no way I would let my kids do what I used to do. And even though that tether, like I said, that rubber band, it would keep me pretty close to home. Like I said, a couple streets over, but we would play, we'd go off in the morning and we wouldn't come back until the evening. And of course, you know, they say, you knew when to come home when the street lights came on. That's what most people said. And I can't say that that was the way that I knew. And because she's here today, I thought I would embarrass her a little bit. Because how I knew to come home was my mother would go outside, and I'm going to have to back up, and she would just do this. Dean Edward! And that's how I knew it was time to go home. And if you got that twice, yep, and if you got it a third time, yeah, you were going to get a talking to when you got home. But it's just a different time. And I know for all of you, it was a different time growing up. And looking back on the good old days is perfectly natural. Each person, really each generation, looks back with nostalgia on what they often is perceived as a safer or simpler time in their lives. However, when we really take a deeper look at our perception of those times, we realize that it wasn't perfect. And have you ever found yourself doing that, looking back at the good old days, or perhaps a time when it might have seemed to be better? Well, that is exactly what was happening to the people of Judah, who, in our reading from the prophet Jeremiah today, were now in exile. There was a lot of turmoil during the time of Jeremiah. When Jeremiah was living in Jerusalem and serving as a priest in the temple, there was always this threat from Babylon happening. The threat of Babylon was growing, and eventually the city of Jerusalem was captured. The people living in the city and in the neighboring communities were taken into captivity. They were uprooted from the familiar land and brought east to the lands along the rivers of Babylon. Many there were homesick, they were distraught, and they longed for those better days. They shared their grief in the Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, and there we wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows there we hung our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs, and our tormentors asked for mirth, saying, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? According to Jeremiah, God heard their cries of grief, so Jeremiah responds to these captives with this message from God. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat what you produce. Have families and raise them up, so they will do the same. Do not decrease. This message seems harsh when we first hear it in some ways, because these peoples were ripped from the promised land, the land of milk and honey. Since the time of Moses, their families had lived in Judah, and they were reminded often they were the chosen people for this chosen land. Poof! Just like that, it's all gone. Yet there is hope in the message, because we read on, God repeatedly shares with the exiles that He will be with them. They might be in exile, but He is not. He is right there beside them. God had promised an exile for a long time because the people of Judah had lost their way. They had prioritized their own will and well-being over doing what was right. They were not taking care of the people on the fringe of their society, and they were not in good relationship with God. They focused on the wrong things and refused to listen to the prophets, which ultimately led to their exile. It is tempting, though, to look at the exile as God's punishment of the people of Judah. In reality, it was an opportunity for reconnection and for growth. And it really is in times in our lives of discomfort that the most growth and meaningful transformation happens within us. Hence, God's message to God's people was one of hope and presence. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. So no matter the turmoil or the chaos in the world, rather than pining for those good old days, we can seek God. And when we seek God, we find our direction. We receive mercy, we experience love, and are given peace within what we believe is a turbulent world. God is with us, and God is still speaking. But how will we respond? Will we respond in the same way as the lepers in our gospel reading from Luke? There were 10 lepers seeking to be healed, but only one returned to express praise and gratitude. This story is familiar to us. Remember, we had just learned sentences before that we have all the faith that we need, but it is how we live out our faith that really matters. Jesus is still on the road traveling towards Jerusalem when from a distance away these 10 men call out to him asking for pity. They were looking for mercy as all 10 suffered with leprosy. What I find interesting is Jesus tells them to go show themselves to the priest. And why is this interesting? Well, according to the Torah, a person had to be made clean first before they went to show themselves to the priest to say that they were clean. Nevertheless, it is on the way to see the priest when these 10 men are made clean. 9 men continue on the way. We don't know if they went to the priests or if they went home or if they returned to the life that they had before they were ill. But we do know what happens to the one. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except for this foreigner?" There is so much going on in these verses. Why is it important to tell the listener? Why is it important to tell the listener or the reader that this man was Samaritan? It's important because not only is the Samaritan a foreigner to the people of Judah, they were hated by the Jews in Jesus' time. If we were to put this into a modern example, it would read like this: 9 American Christians of European descent kept on walking, while one Muslim immigrant from Iran returned to offer praise and gratitude to God. Hearing it was a Samaritan would have been shocking for these people, for the listeners in the first century Judah. Of course, Jesus' response to this man was not shocking. We don't know what his tone was when he questioned where the other 9 went, but his tone with the Samaritan, I believe, was one that was encouraging and full of love when he said to him, "Rise and go, your faith has made you well." It is dangerous to read this passage as if he was saying, if you have faith, a miracle will happen. Rather, it is better to see this Samaritan living out his faith through praising God and expressing gratitude that has made him well. Hence, you can still have a life-limiting illness and still feel joy. You can be in a war-torn landscape and still feel close to God. You can have everything taken away from you, but still express gratitude. It is through our relationship with Jesus that makes us well. It is living out our faith every day in God, our faith in God, that makes us well. Jesus said, "It is the thief that comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." Our circumstances can be that thief. Our longing for how things once were can be the thief. Our traumas, our lack of forgiveness, our anger, our complacency, and even our comfort can be the thief. Thief that robs us from our joy, robs us from love, robs us from mercy and peace. When we let go of our burdens and look to Jesus to express our praise and to give thanks regardless of our circumstances, we find an abundant life. We are made well. One of my favorite pastors I listen to on a daily basis is Nicky Gumbel and his wife Pippa. They run a ministry in England called Alpha, which is now a worldwide ministry. Nicky shared a story about two of their good friends. Before Nicky and Pippa knew Earl and Tommy, Earl had way too much money. He did not need to work. He took all kinds of drugs, including heroin. At the age of 30, he ended up in the hospital, and someone came to visit him in the hospital and gave him a New Testament. He was thrilled by this. The paper was so thin that it was perfect for rolling joints. He rolled his way through Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But when he came to John's Gospel, he started reading. As a result of reading the words of John's Gospel, he encountered Jesus Christ. He was filled with joy, and the psychologist that was in charge of his case, who was a very beautiful young woman who had actually done modeling before, one day she came and sat down with Earl and said, "Look, I have it all. Success, beauty, and endless qualifications, yet I am not fulfilled. Your life is a mess, yet you seem to have something, a peace and a joy. What is it?" Then he led her to faith in Jesus Christ. Later they were married. Earl and his wife Tommy were great friends of Nicky and Pippa at Theological School in Oxford, England. His life had been radically changed by the words of God in the Bible. Why I share this story today is not because of the amazing conversions to Christianity, but because they did not go back to their former lives. Earl and Tommy really had it all: money, beauty, and career, yet they still felt empty. Earl used drugs and Tommy used achievements, but neither were filled with peace and joy until they met Jesus on the road of life. We all can feel like this from time to time. We can feel like exiles in a foreign land. We can feel alone in a crowded room. We can feel anxious even when we have it all. We can feel like there is a deep, dark hole within us, even when we have it all. However, it is not until we start living out our faith like the exiles in Babylon, like the healed Samaritan, and like Earl and Tommy that we feel well. It is not, then, looking back on the good old days that brings us meaning. It is living out a faith of praise and a faith of gratitude that makes us well. Practicing gratitude, in a sense, is practicing our faith. Through our gratitude, we find that God exists in all things, And through finding God in all things, we recognize our own faith. Through living out a faith, whether here in church or in our neighborhoods or in the wider world, brings peace and joy not only to ourselves but to everyone that we interact with. So no matter who you are, what has been done to you, or where you are on life's journey, call out to Jesus either to say, "Have pity on me," or to say, "You are wonderful, and thank you, because you have made me well." Let us have a prayer. God, your great love compels us all. Thank you for never giving up on us. We pray that we can love others in that same way. Please help us by your Spirit to prioritize people in our lives, serve those who are in need, and share the love of Jesus with everyone we encounter. In Jesus' name, amen.